Faizan is the co-founder and head of machine learning for Headstarter, a large community of software engineers all around the earth. The following is a conversation with Faizan on his journey in tech and his experience being at Desi in New York City.
Faizan, how would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Faizan. I'm the co-founder of Headstarter, and I like to think of myself as three things. One is a founder, another one is an engineer, and another one is an educator. So as a founder, I'm a co-founder of Headstarter. I basically lead all technical work for the company, and so I'm able to build out all of our products and you know, also teach how to build those products,
Right.
ranging from full stack to AI applications. And I've taught AI to probably I would say maybe over 1,000 people so far. And it's something that I'm really proud of. And so, yeah, I mean, I like to categorize myself in those three buckets. But, I went to St. John's University. I got my master's in data science and bachelor's in computer science. Did a 5-year program there. So graduated my master's in May of 2023 and my bachelor's a year before that. And ever since graduating, have been working full time on Headstarter and
Yeah.
actually turned down my full time offer for Amazon to do this full time.
Yeah.
And so something that I don't regret, and I'm very happy I made that decision.
So you're very passionate about Headstarter. So would you like to tell us how exactly you got started with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been interested or really passionate about education in CS. And so let me take you all back to the exact moment when I found out about Headstarter. I have a very vivid memory of this. I was in vacation. I was on vacation in Puerto Rico actually,
Yeah.
and I was on Instagram and I found one of Headstarter's posts and I saw that a lot of my friends from high school were like part of it. And these friends, we were part of the same robotics team at my high school, Forest Hills High School. And so I had a lot of respect for them because these are some of the smartest people that I know. And I saw that they were involved with Headstarter. So I was immediately very intrigued because I thought if they're part of Headstarter, then they must be doing something really cool, right? And I've also been really interested in entrepreneurship. So, I grew up watching Shark Tank. It was like my favorite show. And my goal in life was to always work in big tech and start my own company after that. And so I saw that, Yassine and the other people involved in Headstarter, they're like very young, right? They were like 22 or like probably like 20 at that time and like already had their own company. So I thought, why not, try to get involved now, with
Yeah.
like a company because they were doing something that I really resonated with, which is providing students with opportunities that they might not get like in school or anywhere else. And so I found about them to Instagram and I actually posted about them on the CS Discord of my school. So I was the president of the ACM student chapter at St. John's, which is the Computer Science and Cybersecurity Club. I posted about them immediately there because I thought, it's a really good opportunity. And then it's funny because when I was in vacation in Puerto Rico, and then just like a couple weeks after, I was starting my internship at Amazon in Seattle. And one of the previous co founders of Headstarter worked full time at Amazon. And so when I joined Amazon, when I started, I emailed him and I, told him I'm really interested in like getting involved. And so I set up a meeting with him and then, he liked my story, like how passionate I was. He told me to go meet with Yassine. So I set up a meeting with Yassine and he also really liked my passion and everything. And so once my internship at Amazon ended, when I came back to New York, I set up a office visit with some members of the ACM club to go visit like the Head Start office. It's in Long Island City, a really nice area. And so we went to the office, and there I was thinking, you know what, this is such a cool place. I have to like get involved somehow, right? Like I want to join the team because at the time my Amazon internship ended, but I wasn't sure if I want to, continue there, or also I wanted to keep my options open in terms of like um, what companies to join like after graduating, because when I finished my Amazon internship, I had one I had one final year left in school for my master's, and so I knew that the market was still tough at that time. This was like 2022, like late 2022. The market was still tough at that time. So I was thinking getting involved with Headstarter, it'll only boost my resume, and I can, apply to like other companies as well after like that experience. And so what I did is I pitched an idea I had on like some like AI resume tool. Now keep in mind this is October 2022. ChatGPT did not release yet. And I wanted to mention that because like I was doing AI and ML like years before GPT came out. I published a research paper on ML like almost 5 years ago at this point. And so I pitched that idea to one of the other co-founders of Headstarter, and he really liked it. And then at that point, they just kept inviting me back to visit the office. And then one day, Yassine finally decided, okay, let's give him a shot. And he kind of gave me an offer. And honestly, I wasn't even looking to like code or do anything technical at that time. I was more interested in like, I saw that they weren't even active on Instagram. They didn't really, I felt that they weren't doing a good job of getting the word out there on Headstart and like everything they're doing. And so I thought, why don't I told him like, dude, let me just handle your Instagram page. Let me just do some of your marketing work. And so that's what they kind of brought me on for. I was literally head of marketing. Um, I think that was like my official title, like or like marketing lead or something. I wasn't even doing any technical work. And then so from there I joined, and then I set up like a hackathon for my school, St. John's. We did a hackathon at our office, and then from there it was kind of like it was just helping out with some like operational work. And then when around like March or April of 2023, that's when like the GPT API came out. And at that point we had a huge opportunity, and like, okay, now we can actually use AI to build out our entire product. And it was also at that point that the other co-founders of Headstarter ended up leaving. And being that I was like really passionate and involved, Yassine asked me if I wanted to become co-founder. And that obviously had certain implications, and meant that I had to, because I had actually accepted my return offer for Amazon, but I would have to obviously turn that down to pursue the co-founder opportunity, because it's not possible to build a business like on the side. Like if
Yeah.
you're really serious about it, it has to be a full-time endeavor. And so I thought about it for some days, and then I realized this is like kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. And so I ended up turning down my full-time offer for Amazon to pursue this full-time.
Yeah.
So from the beginning to like then, that's like my journey. And like I joined as like basically an intern, and then I ended up like now like owning a majority stake of the company.
That's very inspiring. And when you became the co-founder and you turned out Amazon, um, how much work did you have to put in to get an estimation? Like I know you said you were the head of marketing, and like, so what new responsibilities did you have to take on when you became the co-founder?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's pretty much like there's no end to my responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
Because I can tell you honestly, that was like a while ago. I feel like at that point I handled all the technical work of the company. So at that point, it was a very tough time at that point, to be honest, because we had this like fellowship thing going on, but we didn't have like a solid product that we could actually bring to the market and turn into a real like venture backable business.
Right.
And so it was my responsibility to figure out what product to build, actually build it, and get it in the hands of users, get feedback on it, iterate on their feedback. So yeah, at that point we were going through a major shift. We were restructuring our team, and so we had to actually build a product,
Yeah.
and we really needed to raise funding
Yeah.
because it was not. I mean, like Racine, he already put in a ton of money
Yeah.
into the business at that point, and he was been full time, since the beginning, and I didn't have much like funds myself. I just did, so yeah, that was my responsibility. I actually build out the product, use like my ML experience to figure out what we can do with AI to like help teach like computer science or software engineering.
Yeah. So, what's like the very early struggles of going through the stages of a startup? Like, you have a seed rounding, and then you have all these other stages. So, what struggles did you face in each round?
Yeah, well, it's funny because we technically haven't even raised a seed
Oh,
round.
I see.
It's only been pre-seed so far.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of folks might not realize how hard it is to raise funding,
Yeah.
especially given that, you know, I'm a very proud alum of St. John's. I'm a very proud of, being an alum of that school. But if I'm being very honest, if you go anywhere outside of New York, nobody will know what St. John's is. And that is a big thing. Like people say school doesn't really matter for, like raising funding. But if you go to Stanford, your chances of raising funding are pretty much 1,000x, multiplied by that, you know. So that that was like initial struggle, like just raising funding. Where both Yassine and he went to Queens College, I went to St. John's. They're not well known at all for CS or anything, and that was one thing. So it was hard to gain. Actually, let me take that back. That was actually not a something that investors cared that much about. I guess it was more so like we were both super young, right? Like at that time, I just turned 24, like like 3 months ago. Yassine is 1 year older than me, and at this point, this was like last year. Um, we were trying to do everything we can to raise funding, but one thing that I realized is investors hate consumer startups where you're selling to individual people. They just like B2B where you're selling to other companies because it's a much more stable and I guess scalable revenue source. We've been very much consumer oriented since the beginning, and it was just really hard to find investors that believe in that kind of a vision. And so not only were we consumer, but we were also in the ed tech space, right? Like education technology. And if you look at the landscape of ed tech companies, it's like a huge graveyard of companies that have just failed in the space, right? You have like the huge players, Udemy, Coursera. You have, like basically like all the online like platforms, right? To like upskill yourself. And so we were always compared to them. And the question that we were always asked is like, what is your moat? What is your differentiating factor? And I guess we didn't have much to say at in the early stages because it's like they always used to ask, what is our defensibility, right? And to be honest, I think if any investor asks that, it just shows incompetence because you can ask that about any company. Like what when you're like a two-person team in like the earliest stages, of course you're not going to have anything that's truly defensible, right? I think the key thing is that we had we had incredible conviction. That's what Yassine and I think is our strongest feat, in that we truly believe that CS education is broken, it's archaic, and it needs to change, especially with all the new AI advancements. And we're seeing CS students graduate without jobs, and even if they get a job, it's not related to anything technical. And so we had conviction in the idea through and through. Like we were never challenged in terms of our conviction, right? And I guess that eventually the payoff, where we did end up getting one investor, then our second one, and a third one, and kind of just like kept on going from there. Once we had that initial traction, you just need one person to say yes, and then it becomes a lot easier. But back to the original question of like early
Yeah.
struggle. Well, that was the main struggle, right? Just being able to
Yeah.
raise funding. But I guess if you look at the effects of like struggling to raise funding, it's like I like we worked out of our office, right? Like so I guess I've never actually said this publicly, but like Yassine and I, or actually no, I think I said it, but Yassine and I didn't pay ourselves anything
Yeah.
for a year, and so if you think about it, I turned down my full time offer for Amazon.
Yeah.
I was around like 140K total compensation, to earn $0, right? Now, of course, I have equity in the company, but it's not liquid. I can't just sell that like anytime I want, and so the whole point is I took the offer for the equity because I know one day that
Yeah.
equity is going to be extremely valuable, right? So you see, and I are making zero money, literally zero. I mean, for me, I have certain expenses. I have like my car. I have to like pay for gas and food and whatever.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was super tough because we were in the office like 5 days a week, and I was like, you know what? Some days I didn't need lunch. Some days I didn't need lunch, or if I did, it was like one protein bar, and that
Yeah.
was it for like the whole day because I just couldn't. It was just too much to get lunch every day. And the days that I did get lunch, I felt like guilty. I'm like, you know what? I'm wasting money here. Like literally every single expense we had to be extremely conscious about because we were like running out of money, right? Like we had to pay for rent for the office, we had to pay like for our tech infrastructure, whatever. And so that was tough, man. I mean, I'm so glad we got out of that. But I
Yeah.
should say there is beauty in those times of struggle where, to be honest, looking back, I never like those days were fun, although they were, super tough because when you're working with people who are super motivated and just want to succeed, it just pushes you past your limit to become better.
Right.
And so, yeah, we're in the lunch, and I guess like, I mean, I should say it should be kind of obvious. I had like zero free time. Like sometimes I had to miss, people's birthdays. I had to miss certain, like family events just to like work. And I mean, that's still true today. It doesn't get any like there's no such thing as work-life balance when you're running a startup. But I think I've learned, almost 2.5 years in, I've learned to kind of just like adapt and work with that. But a lot of the early struggles are kind of still here. We're still pretty early stage.
Yeah.
I guess there's different kinds of problems at every stage. We're far past that stage where we were struggling to build a product and whatever. Now we have a product out there, and now the main thing is like getting more people to be on it.
Yeah.
But I know it's a long answer to your question, but hopefully that shares.
I think it's a very insightful answer because you're very detailed in exactly what you did, and it will inspire like a lot of people who are just finding their first startup, second startup, and going back to that college and branding and all that other type of question. So the CS world wasn't always like this. It was just like more people started getting it each and every year. So it has become a very competitive field in just like maybe the last 5-10 years because everybody's in it. So if you were in high school today, what exactly would you tell yourself to like get you a head start ahead of everybody else right now?
Yeah, that's a good question actually, because we have paid users in our program in high school right now.
Yeah.
So it's not even something I have to think about myself. There's actual people that I'm giving advice to on this. So one thing that I would say, and I guess this might be controversial, but I would say maybe consider not going to college at all,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yeah.
If you do go to college, make sure you're not breaking the bank. If you're actually taking out a loan to go to college, that might be a huge, you might really regret that. Unless you're going to MIT, Stanford, Harvard, or like any Ivy League, I feel like it really doesn't matter at that point. If you do go to Ivy League, there's a strong case that, like, obviously it's worth it. But even like NYU, yeah, I don't think it's worth it, because the fact of the matter is, if you're in high school right now, if we just think logically here, by the time you graduate college, like it's 2025 now, like let's say like 2029 you graduate college, we're gonna have like AGI or an AI that's 100% better than like any human engineer, right? So I think the key thing here is to realize that jobs are completely going to change in the next even 2 to 3 to 5 years. And that if you really think that an engineer is going to be like coding manually, like by themselves all day, without the use of AI to help them, that's like completely ridiculous to think that it's not like we're definitely going to get to a point where 80 to 90% of code is AI generated. If I'm speaking for myself, pretty much like 90% of my code is AI generated because I use, this AI code editor called Cursor. And the key thing to realize here is that for anyone in high school, don't be that discouraged, because to be honest, AI does make a lot of mistakes. I spent over an hour yesterday trying to fix a super simple bug that Claude 3.5 Sonnet wasn't able to figure out. But the key thing that I want to mention here is that human plus AI is incredibly powerful. If you're already a competent engineer, then AI will literally make you like superhuman. Like you can code literally 100 times faster. And so if I was in high school, I would literally try to build new projects every single day. Or if it's not every day, like every week, because the best way to learn is by actually doing something. And I think, in CS programs or the CS in general, there's too much of a focus on theory, and you're not applying any of the skills that you're learning most of the time, right? I see way too often, and I believe I'm very, I can speak on this in detail because I've seen it firsthand. People graduate from college, they don't know how to connect like front end and back end. They don't know how to connect like two APIs together. So it's like, what are you spending the 4 years in school for if you don't know how to do the most basic thing, right? Because back then, it used to be like you're doing CS to be able to build anything that comes to your mind, right? That's the reason why I did CS. But I think the whole industry, or like people started getting into it just for the money. They thought it was easy. And maybe it was, maybe like around 2020 and pre-pandemic. But I think now, unless you have a true passion for it, it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to stand out. So, yeah, I guess like if I was in high school, just build a project every day. Think of a problem that you face that you can use some technology to help solve, right? Like, for example, that's what I did. I found like I'm spending a lot of time researching stocks. So I built like a program to help me find them faster, you know? And so that's just like one example. But if you do that, I would also recommend posting everything on Twitter. And this is something that I myself should do more, where I've seen people get internships by posting on Twitter or DMing people on Twitter. And just by, it's called like building in public, where you post about everything you're working on in public so people can kind of learn your journey. So I would do that. And honestly, you know, if you keep doing that for like consistently for even 2 3 months, you probably get an internship just from that, because you would be seen as much higher signal than even someone that maybe they go to an Ivy League school, but they're just doing classwork. They don't know how to make a simple web app, right? Whereas with you, you actually show competence in that your work is out there, your code is out there, anyone can check it out. They can see that you're actually skilled in what you're talking about. And so you would be much more hireable than someone, even from an Ivy League, that might not know the basic stuff of building like web apps, for example. So that's what I would do. And like if you're applying to college, then maybe, um, yeah, or I guess if you do go to college, I'll say the main thing I got at St. John's was community. I'm still very much in contact with, my friends from St. John's. That's actually like what most of my friends consist of today, like my friends from St. John's. And obviously, because of my affiliation with the ACM chapter, um, I've gone to meetings pretty much every semester and like led workshops for them even after graduating. I think the community aspect is extremely important. That might be hard to replicate anywhere else, where after you graduate college, there's very few places you can go where everyone is like the same age as you, kind of like similar to you. And so if you're going to college, just focus on the community aspect and probably just learn on your own. That's why I would say um, don't like take out a loan for college because it's probably not going to be worth it, to be honest.
Right. So, speaking on that, like building the network, connections, community, all that, I think, um, what advice would you give for people who struggle with that? For example, when I was in CS class, a lot of people like just sat by themselves, they sat in the corner, didn't want to talk to anybody, just like did the classwork, then like went back to home, and like just got like straight A's, but it's like they didn't want to talk to anybody, anything like that. What's your
Mm.
advice to people who are either antisocial or just like don't want to talk to other people?
Yeah, this is a great question because it really does resonate with me. And I have never really been that much of a social person. If I'm being very honest, I actually don't like, I guess, like talking to people. I would much
Yeah,
rather just code. If I'm being very
yeah,
honest, I just like coding. But it's funny because like a large part of my job right now is literally
yeah,
onboarding every single user that joins Headstarter. So their first introduction to like the program is through me. So I have to make
yeah,
sure that's really good. But so I've always been, I've never really been that outspoken or kind of I've always actually been very reserved and I guess shy.
yeah,
And honestly, I started to realize that if I want to be successful, that I cannot just like be quiet all the time, right? Like I
right,
can't just be the quiet kid in the corner that doesn't say anything and get straight A's because those are not the ones that actually end up building generational companies and you hear about them, right?
yeah,
So what I did, I guess, is I put myself in positions that I felt uncomfortable. You know,
yeah,
I went from being the shy kid to leading the CS club at my school,
yeah,
right? And that was obviously a big deal for me because I was, always scared of public speaking. I honestly never really talked to that many people before got involved with the ACM club. And so I forced myself to kind of be outgoing, to talk to people and kind of, build my network and connections. And I guess a lot of it, came from when I first started working at Headstarter, obviously, because I'm interacting with a lot of people and, a lot of students. And so I think it all comes down to a mindset, right? That if you think you're going to be successful by being like shy or quiet, it's just not going to happen, right? Because people need to know who you are, they need to know your name. And it's the people that speak out more that, kind of end up succeeding, right? Because, like if I'm meeting with an investor and they see that, I'm just like quiet and I'm not able to like sell, right? Then why would they want to invest in me if they see that I can't even talk to a customer or, anyone else, right? So I guess for me, I forced myself to be in a position where I have to network, I have to talk to people, and like I need to get myself out there, or else like it's just gonna be a huge problem for me, right? So it all comes down to a mindset that you have to realize that like if you want a good job, it's very easy to see like who's like shy in like an interview. I've interviewed maybe like I don't know like 50 plus people, and it's always the people that are outgoing that stand out more because what people don't realize is that people like working with people who are interesting and are easy to talk to. And if you're like super shy and reserved, it's extremely easy to spot, and it's just going to hurt your chances of getting a good job because you're going to be seen as someone super super dull, super boring, and no one's going to want to work with you because maybe you're like kind of awkward. And You just need to work on your social skills. So that's what I would say. Put yourself in uncomfortable positions. Be part of your school's club, and I guess like yeah, just start talking to more people. You know.
It's it's a very different process from like forming friendships in high school, then to forming friendships in college, and then forming friendships in real life. How would
Hmm.
you like compare the different like progression of how you like form friendships?
Oh, that's a good one. So with me, I've always kept a very small circle. My
Yeah,
closest friends now are my friends from high school. And so I guess like with me, I only want to associate myself with people that, you know, are a good influence. So and people that like also uplift me and like motivate me to become better, right? So obviously, I guess like with all my friends, they have that aspect to them, where they're like super hardworking, they're very motivated, they want to succeed, and they also celebrate your wins, right? Because you don't want friends that are like jealous, where if you achieve something, then they're like, oh, it's like they see it as like you're like better than them, and they like envy you. Like obviously, you don't want friends like that. And I guess like it's pretty hard, to be honest, to find those genuine friendships. I guess like but like it's gotten like maybe I guess a lot harder now as like co-founder, because I guess maybe people only see like the business side of like maybe talking to me. They don't see like how I might be a good friend, I guess. But I think obviously my friends that have known me since high school, they know like my upbringing. They know that I like to have fun, have a good time, and so with them it was never really been an issue. But I guess like the way I've made friends is always through kind of like clubs or like different organizations. My friends from high school were formed through the robotics club, right? And from college, it was from the ACM club. And then, to be honest, yeah, there's not many other people I know outside of that circle. And so with me, like yeah, I've like my closest friends I still talk to today on a day basis are from high school, because we've all been through a lot together. We've seen each other's journey, and I guess like for me, new question now, um, I guess it is hard. I don't know if I even
yeah,
know how to answer that, because
yeah,
maybe it's something that I myself I'm trying to figure out
yeah,
how to make like genuine friends.
yeah.
But that's what I would say for now.
Speaking of that, like we could transition to talking about co-workers, right? So it seems like we have a lot of companies that are having mass layoffs, and there's like hiring has slowed down. So
Hmm.
how will AI impact your coworkers? That are maybe like software engineers or that are into like the CS field. So what's your prediction on like how AI is going to impact the job market?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a very interesting perspective on this, because I'm an engineer and a founder, so I'm directly involved in not only building the product but hiring people to help build the product, right?
Yeah,
So here's the thing, right? There's a lot of different perspectives on this, but I think this is mine based on my own experience, right? So
yeah,
first off, I think people might think that Headstarter has a ton of employees. Let me tell you right now, it's literally only Yassine and I as full-time employees.
oh,
Literally only us two. We're looking to grow the team, obviously, but we do have like part-time like virtual assistants and whatnot, but right now it's literally only us two.
yeah,
And that should put into perspective that like literally just me, I'm able to maintain the product, build new features, build completely separate products,
yeah,
teach how to build them, and do like a lot of other things on the side as well, like operational stuff. So if me myself as one person am able to do all of that,
yeah,
because I'm augmented with AI, I'm able to use AI to like speed up my work like 100 times. There's much less of a need to hire another person,
right,
right? if I myself am able to do the work of 5 engineers, it becomes much harder to justify bringing another person on,
Yeah.
right? Because realistically, for me, all I need is like, an idea in my head or like a product spec. I put it into Cursor, and with some like prompting here and there, it's able to build the whole thing out for me, right?
Yeah.
So then the question becomes, if I myself am able to do that, the work that would have taken like maybe 2 3 days for another engineer, and I get it done in 10 minutes through some prompting in Cursor, why do I need to hire another person,
Hmm.
right? So that is something that people need to realize. Where, okay, you might think that uh, companies are not hiring and whatever. The reality is that AI is making engineers a lot more productive. They're able to do work a lot more faster. So the need to hire another engineer is a lot lower, because they're getting to do more work for in a less amount of time. So what people have to realize now is you have to be so good at your work that you need to know what you offer that's even better than AI. I guess, right? That's how you start to think about it. Because, for example, AI is not that good at implementing complex, like front end components, in React, for example. Like with me, here is the limitation, and here's what we need someone to fill the role for. Sometimes we need like super complex front end, like components put together, and I I'm not good at front end. I kind of just like prompt my way to making a nice front end. But even then, the models lack certain knowledge on certain front end like patterns. And so if someone is really good at front end, then I would want them to join the team and contribute, because they have knowledge that the models don't have, right? So for any CS student right now, you have to really stop and think about this, because here's the thing, right? As a CS student, you're not entitled to a job. No one's just gonna give you a job like as like a charity thing, right? You have to really prove your worth, because you know, especially for like you see and I, right? Like we literally paid ourselves nothing, and so all the money that we would spend hiring someone, like that's like it took a lot of effort to make that to make that money, right? So we can't just spend it on anyone. And the same goes for like obviously any other startup as well, right? So you have to start and think, what value do you offer that companies, that can like help out companies, right? And so you need to be super super skilled now. That's why the bar is getting a lot higher, because the AI models are getting a lot better. They're able to do a lot more, a lot faster. And so yeah, I mean that's why we're seeing the
Yeah.
layoffs. That's why we're seeing hiring freezes. And I mean I I hope that it stops,
Yeah.
because but I'm not sure if it will, because the models are only going to get better. And so yeah, I mean I guess no one really knows the true impact that AI is going to have on
Yeah.
jobs. It's something we're just going to have to wait and see.
So let's give you a scenario, right? So I know you said like the bar is getting higher, which but more people are still like coming to CS. It's not like just because there is AI, people are stopping to
Mm,
come to CS. It's like every year there's more and more, right?
mm,
So the bar is getting higher and there's more people and not a lot of people, like the vast majority are not meeting that bar. But if you're the top one
mm.
percent, or as we say, like a cracked engineer, it's
Yeah.
like, you're gonna have jobs lined up. You're gonna have job offers from Amazon. You're gonna have job
Mm,
offers from like wherever. But what about the people at the bottom, like who got that CS degree, paid like 100,000, 60,000, whatever they paid, and
mm,
now they don't have any CS jobs, and they're job searching for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, but still no
mm,
job. Like,
mm.
what advice would you have for those people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, because that type of persona you just described,
Yeah,
they are kind of already involved in our program.
yeah,
And so it's something that obviously we have to think about, right? Like, okay, so the persona that you described, like they already have a CS degree, right?
right.
So, okay, gives you a good foundation, like, but I would say from what you should do very specifically, this is the same thing I said for like the high schooler, right? Build a new project every week, post about it on Twitter, on LinkedIn, anywhere else, and just get your name out there, right? Where, like right now, work on a project that companies can use. Like for example, like with me, I'm looking to upskill myself like every single day too, right? And so I'll give an example of a project that I just worked on, like an npm package that I published. It's called LLM chain, and I basically solved my own problem with that by making that npm library, which is I need one specific like API to access many different LLM providers, and it just makes it easy to do that. So with you, like with the if you're struggling to like find a job, work on projects like that solve real problems, and showing that you're able to actually build software that others can use, right? Where I feel like if you've published an npm package, that's probably one of the highest forms of signal in that you're extremely competent like candidate, right? That's one example of like something that's super high signal. Another one is, maybe I'm a bit biased because I did it myself, but like publishing an ML research paper, that is a super high form of signal. Another one is having like a personal blog or like a technical blog. And the key thing here is that what each of the things I just described have in common is publishing, putting your work out there. If you're just on localhost and building things and maybe you don't even push to GitHub, then who's gonna like know about your work, right? Like no one. Like no one's gonna know what you're able to do. And this is the key thing that I think people might not realize, but CS is such a unique field in that the barrier to actually build and publish something is so low, right? Like imagine someone who's like studying chemistry or anything in medicine. For them to actually create something, you have to be in the lab. You have to have all this equipment. You have to like do this and that. For CS, all you need is a laptop and an internet connection, right? That's literally all you need, and you can build software that millions of people around the world can use, right? So everyone should take advantage of that, right? If you have a laptop, if you have an internet connection, you can build software that literally anyone can use around the world. So think of common problems that people have
Yeah.
and how to solve them, right? Maybe it's problems that you face on a daily basis, or maybe it's problems that you know that you just like think of, right? I give you an example. There's one person. It's called. He's like 17 years old. He built an app called Cal AI. He's
Yeah.
making like $1 million a month, and all it is you take a picture of your food and it tells you how many calories there are, right? You don't even need to have that sophisticated of AI knowledge to build that.
Yeah.
But the point is, he built a successful business out of it with no formal AI education, and now he's working on like a bunch of other things too, right? So, more of the story, like publish, get your work out there,
Yeah.
and people will come find you, and you'll be introduced to opportunities that you'll never would have thought of if you didn't start posting, right?
Yeah. So that's good. Now we talked a lot about CS and everything, right? So what is something that you have been waiting for me to ask you? Any question?
Oh,
Yeah. Like what's something you want to talk about that we haven't gotten to yet? Because I know we have not that much time left.
right, right.
Yeah.
I guess like, what does it mean to be cracked?
Yeah. What does it mean to be cracked?
Okay, so the way I would answer this is specifically with two words, and they are urgency and agency.
Hmm.
So what that means is, if you truly, and I'm saying this from the perspective of like, I'm trying to hire someone that fits these criteria, right? So urgency, what that means is you do all your work with such extreme, like, it absolutely needs to be done, or else there's going to be like a problem, right? Where if you get a task assigned, or if there's a bug in production that's affecting users, you act instantly and you go and fix it right away, right? It's extremely
Yeah.
urgent for you to act. Now, that's urgency. Agency is the way I would define it is like the ability to just do things on your own that are not explicitly asked of you, right? Like if I give an engineer a task, that person not only does the task, but they identify certain, you know, implications of what that task might affect, like maybe other parts of the code base, and they go ahead and update those parts as well, right? If you're basically just doing the bare minimum, then that's an issue, right? Especially if you were to join literally a two-person startup right now and you're
Yeah.
doing the bare minimum, that's not the place for you to be, right?
Right.
So you need to have these two qualities if you want to work at a startup, or else it's just not going to, work out. Because with Yasin and I mean, I think we want to obviously lead by example. All of the work that we do, every single task, whether it be small or big, is extremely urgent, and it needs to be get done. It needs to get done right away. And we do things obviously without being explicitly asked, to do so. So if you're a candidate, looking to join a startup, you need to have these two qualities. And if you do have them, that means you're cracked. Well, obviously, you need to have the actual technical skills too. And so, if I were to expand a bit more, you need to be able to build anything, right? Whether that be classical ML, generative AI, full stack web apps, or anything else. If you don't know how to do it, don't say you don't know and then just give up right there. Like, go ahead and learn. All the resources are out there, and you should have the ability to learn by yourself, right? And so that's what we mean by cracked.
So let's say somebody took your advice and they published a research paper. They have an application. Now they're thinking of, hey, like I did all this, but I really think I have it in me to start a startup. So
Hmm.
what would be your advice for somebody who's just like beginning to think of starting a startup?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's an interesting one because I mean, now that I'm like 2.5 years in, it is something that I started thinking about of like, okay, what are some things that I would have done different or that we would have done different, right? So my advice to first time founders would be think about like we have a very specific philosophy, which is distribution eats product for breakfast. And what that means is you can have the best product in the world. Like, for example, you can have the best LLM in the world, but if no one knows about it, it literally does not matter. Like, no one will care because they don't know about it. And so you can have an okay-ish product, but if you have millions of users, then that's a successful kind of business right there, right? So for a first-time founder, you need to think about how you're going to distribute your product, how you're going to get users on it, right? If you're a B2B product, if you sell to other companies, just like cold emailing is not a viable strategy. You need to have more of a targeted approach, right? If you're just sending out like 500 cold emails a day, that's not a that it's not like that scalable, and it's not that predictable of a like funnel for you to like get new users. You need to think of some other like ways to scale, right? If you're selling to consumer, then you need to be really active on socials, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, all that. And so, because the idea can be very cool, but if you have a way to actually get, like, the idea can be whatever, but as long as you have a way to get users onto it, that is actually more important, right? Or else you don't have a company if you don't have users. And so think of that. And also, there's a lot of um, like if any of you watching like have watched like Y Combinator, they have a lot of videos on YouTube. There are specific ideas called like tar pit ideas, ones that look interesting or sound interesting, but they're actually, if you look into startups that have operated in the space, it's like a huge graveyard of companies that have failed. I think a perfect example is like, you know, like finding events near you. It's like a terrible startup to start events near you, or I guess like any weight tracking or anything like that. It's been done 100,000 times. Any like thing that's like not like that novel, it's probably not going to work. And so you need to get really creative on what your idea is, right? Because this is another thing. Like, sure, it's very hard to find a novel idea, a complete novel idea, but as long as you do it 10 times better than the best competitor, then I think you have a solid offering, right? Like, for example, just today, I was looking at certain, email API providers. There's like 10 of them, right? Or honestly, way more. Each one of them are venture-backed businesses. They each have raised like 10, $20 million. And so they're all doing the same thing, right? So you have to think about what is your differentiator, where, if you're creating like a photo sharing app, how is it different than Instagram? How is it 10 times better than Instagram, right? And so when you start to think like this, then, a lot of it, you have to think about the idea, how you distribute it. And also, there's a certain thing called founder market fit. So Yasin and I, we went through the problems ourselves. Like, we went through the CS education. We saw it was inadequate. That's why we're starting this today, right? It's not like we studied like medicine and then found this out. We went through the problem ourselves. We faced it ourselves. That's why we started this. And so, if you're like a lawyer, maybe you start like a AI. I mean, it's been done already. Like, the companies like Harvey, they do like AI to assist lawyers. And so, if you're a lawyer, you would have founder market fit, and that you have the domain expertise in building a company in that domain. If you're building a company, um, that builds rockets, I mean, I can't say I know anything about them, and so that's probably not a good company to found at that point.
Mhm.
So think about these things here if you want to start your own startup.
Yep, thank you. So one thing, when I was like finding my first startup with my friends, one problem I faced was like distributing the equity. So do you have any thoughts on how like startup founders should distribute their equity for the whole startup?
Yeah, that's a good question. so so I guess I can answer this based on how I'm not going to share specific numbers, but so for Headstarter itself, right? I wasn't a original co-founder. Like, I wasn't there at the very, very beginning. And so that's why, and I also didn't put in like my own money into the company. And so because of that, Yasin has more equity than me. I think that's obviously totally fair because he was there since the very beginning and he put in a lot of money himself, right? So I have less equity than him, but it's not that much less because right now we're both like leading the company. And so for anyone just starting off, I think it is definitely a very, very serious conversation, very conversation you need to have, or else it can like literally make or break your company, right? Most startups fail because of like co-founder issues. So what I would say is, um, if it's like three people, I guess it might start to get kind of tricky. With us, since it's only two of us, it's a bit easier. But one thing is, you need to. This has actually saved us a lot. If you're offering equity, make sure it's on like a 1 year cliff. So what that means is the person needs to be at the company for at least a year for their equity to vest. And so, or actually, the way it's kind of set up is, you get equity over the course of like I think 4 years, but you only get the first bit of it after spending a year at the company. I believe that's how it's set up. I would actually have to look into it more, but with that, the incentive is that you're staying for the company for the long term, right? You can just join the company, get some equity, and then leave after 2 months because that'll be a huge issue, right? So specifically for co-founders, right? You need to know what is their end goal, right? Because Yasin and I have been very like have very high expectations in like where we want to take Headstarter. We have had many acquisition offers that we have all turned down without even batting a single eye at the offer. We have not entertained any offers to sell the company because we only want to sell at a certain valuation, which is probably over $1 billion, or if there's a buyer that is, something very interesting, like a very interesting company, then we would start to consider it. So being that we're both aligned on what is our exit plan for the company, it makes it very simple that it is a long-term game where our first investor, he was at his company AppLovin for like 12 years, and like now AppLovin is he was the first engineer hired at that company, and now AppLovin is worth over $100 billion. And so we're only 2.5 years in. There's many, many, many years to go for this to see how it plans out. But you need to be aligned on what is your end goal. Is this like a lifestyle business that just funds your life, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But if you want to build a venture backable business, that's a very different story in that you need to have very aggressive growth year over year, and the end goal should be to get to $1 billion valuation and beyond, right? So if everyone is aligned on that, then I think you can set a value that, you know, um, I guess like my perspective is if it's two of you, then there needs to be one that has more equity because that person is like the decision maker and whatever. And, that person should be CEO. In my case, that's Yassine. If it's three people, now, like regardless of how many people there are, how many co-founders, you need to have one that does have some more control because they need to be the decision maker when things go wrong, right? And things are going to go wrong. That is like inevitable, right? And so if it's three of you, maybe one has 35% equity and the rest have, just like less or whatever. And then that person should be CEO. And then, ideally that person is the most dedicated to the mission, to the company. And so that's how I think it should be split.
Yeah, thanks so much. So we're pretty much running out of time. But last question: any hopes for the future?
Yeah. So one thing I would say is one thing I'm really looking forward to doing this year, and it's something I'm very proud to say, is that there's pretty much not a country. There's like I can go to pretty much any country in the world, and there is going to be someone in that country that knows about Headstarter or has been directly involved in it. We have users in the most remote areas that you would think of. We have a user in Mauritius. I didn't, to be honest, I had literally no idea where that is. It's like off the coast of Africa. We have people in Japan, Australia, across South Asia, across Europe, across Africa, across South America, obviously across US and Canada. There's pretty much there's someone that's involved in Headstarter in literally every single country you can think of. And something I really want to do this year is go and visit them, and it makes me really happy whenever I'm onboarding a new user. I always ask them, "Oh, where are you like calling from? Where are you from?" And usually they're always from somewhere that's very interesting. And I just love seeing them smile when I say, I hope to visit you someday, because I genuinely mean that,
Yeah.
And so it's funny because I'm going to Toronto in like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of users in Toronto and like the Waterloo area, and so I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, I mean, it's gonna turn to like a world tour. So
Yeah.
that's something I'm really looking forward to. And I guess obviously all the advancements in AI this year, I think I'm working on some really cool stuff where I think just with a bit more refinement, I think I'll be ready to push it out, get a lot of people to use it, and maybe see how that works as like a product for like companies to use. And so, yeah, a lot of things this year in the
Yeah.
work.
It's good. It was a great conversation. We talked about so many things. We talked about Headstarter, AI, CS jobs, and I prepared a lot more questions, but I couldn't get to ask them. But maybe next time, you know. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but thank you so much for coming to the podcast.
Of course. Thank you for having
No
me.
problem.
This is
Speaking of names, how did you guys come up with the name Headstarter?
Oh, well, to be honest, when I joined, I wasn't involved in like the naming of the company,
Yeah,
but like when I joined the company, it was already named Headstarter, and
yeah,
we weren't going to change it. But if you think about it, I think it's like the perfect name
yeah,
because the whole point is that if you go through a Headstarter, you're getting a head start in your career,
right.
and that's why like anyone who's like in high school that joins our program, I say you're a true example of a head starter because you're getting a head start in your career by, going through our program.
Hmm.
So you can think of it like that. You're getting a head start in your career, in your life,
Yeah,
everything.
and also I see like you guys have like a lot of projects you guys build are related to like AI/machine learning. So, what has been your experience with all that?
Yeah. So I got into computer science because I always loved coding, but specifically, I was always fascinated by machine learning, right? To me, the concept of a machine learning by itself was so like fascinating, right? I couldn't even fathom like how it was possible, but I was always really really interested in it. But I was always intimidated by it, at the same time, and I didn't really know how to get started. But I think that kind of changed one day where I just looked up some articles online and I decided to just learn a bit on my own, right? I ended up learning Python by myself. It's funny because St. John's doesn't actually teach Python. I just ended up learning it by myself. It was pretty easy given that I had a strong foundation in Java, but I ended up learning it by myself. And then I came across some articles that uh, tell you how to do like machine learning. And so I built a couple of projects here and there. One of them was like I've been really interested in finance, so obviously I started off with like being able to predict stock prices. Didn't really go too far with that. It wasn't really accurate at all. Worked on a couple other projects here and there, but the turning point was 2020. March 2020 when the pandemic was first hitting, where everyone we were like quarantined. Everyone's at home, and like now it's like I have to like figure out like what to do now, right? Like I have a lot of free time. I need to spend it wisely, right? And so during the pandemic, I came across a data set on this website called Kaggle,
Yeah,
where on Kaggle they share it's like a platform where people post like data sets for machine learning tasks. And I came across this data set of like hospital patients, of like images of x-rays, chest x-rays of hospital patients that have either COVID, viral pneumonia, or in normal condition. And so at this point, I had already a very base understanding of computer vision, where you can feed a model, like a machine learning model, an image and have it classify that image, like, based on certain different categories. And so I thought, okay, this is a very straightforward computer vision task in that I have chest x rays of three classes. One class is COVID, one class is viral pneumonia, and the other class is normal condition. And so I thought, okay, let me train a convolutional neural network to classify these X-ray images, right? And so that's what I did. This was 2020, so there's no ChatGPT, there's no like anything. I was just straight up going by tutorials and blogs online, and I spent maybe like 2 3 weeks on it, and I was getting fairly decent results. I was getting a accuracy of around maybe like 75 80, but obviously I wanted to increase that accuracy, right? At that point, I reached out to my professor because I know he does work in computer vision and specifically in medicine as well. And so I met with him, had some email exchange, and he was, impressed by my work. And he told me he wanted me to actually publish the research, and like write a paper about it and publish it. When he told me that, I was actually very, very intimidated. I was very taken aback because not only had I never read a research paper, I had never, you know, I didn't know how to actually how to explain the math behind all the work that I did, right? to this day, and I hope that this serves as inspiration for a lot of people that might be watching, I've never taken a linear algebra class. That's literally the most important class to do machine learning. I guess the reason behind it is it was never offered to me at St. John's. So I never took that class when it's probably the most important to understand the math behind machine learning. And so, with that being said, I had zero clue how to explain the math behind it. And so, when my professor asked me to write a paper on it, I was like, no way. Like, how can I do that? I don't even understand a lot of this work myself. But then I realized that's a very flawed way of thinking, because before I even start to do, before I even try, I'm just giving up, right? And I'm so glad that I changed my mind and I decided to give it a shot, because it ended up becoming, I dedicated myself to writing the paper, improving some of the work I did, increasing the accuracy. The highest accuracy I got from my model is 93%. So given a image of like a chest x-ray, it's the model is 93% accurate in how it classifies the image, whether the patient has COVID, whether it has pneumonia, or whether they're in a normal condition. And so I finished up the code, I wrote the paper, and we sent it out to review. It did actually not get accepted the first time from the publisher because I needed to modify some things here and there. But then January 2021, it might actually be 4 years to this day that the paper got published. And that was a huge moment for me, right? Like, I went from having literally zero experience in ML to all of a sudden, maybe 8-9 months later, having a published paper on computer vision, which is, like, to me, one of the hardest domains within ML. And so to me, it was like I conquered my imposter syndrome. I did something that I thought was like impossible, and so that was January 2021. And it's funny because from then, every single day, I would check the website of like where it got published. And all of a sudden, one day I saw that it got its first citation. That means a researcher out there in the world, they cited my paper for their work. So then every single day I'm checking, I'm refreshing the page every single day. Literally before I start working on whatever I'm doing for the day, I check the website for my research paper. And then slowly, day by day, like periodically, I see that number going up. It went from 1 to 2, then 1 to like 5, 1 to 10, and then right now it's at 29. So I went from I was literally, I was 19 years old when I wrote that paper. I had zero formal training in ML, zero formal training in computer vision. I wrote a paper that's been cited 29 times around the world based on some work that I learned how to do by like reading tutorials and blogs online.
Yeah.
And so, hopefully that serves as inspiration for a lot of you watching. But then that is that since then, my professor told me to take graduate level classes from then. So I actually started taking graduate level data science courses as a sophomore in undergrad. And that was pretty fun, to be honest. Well, I don't know if fun is the right word, actually. It was very intimidating because I was a small little kid in a class with like full grown up adults who have like kids. And here I am. I didn't even have a driver's license at that point. And so, like, I started taking those graduate classes in ML, got to learn more of the foundation. And then fast forward, that ended up really helping me get my internships at both Bloomberg and Amazon.
Yeah.
So we can get into that
Yeah,
now.
sure. So, like, what exactly did you do to get an internship at Amazon and Bloomberg?
Yeah, so I should start by saying it was a very tough journey for each of them. So this was 2020 at the time, and I was applying to jobs like everywhere. Like, it was very tough because this was like, the pandemic was going on. It was very uncertain, a lot of uncertainty, and like what's going to happen. But I was still applying everywhere, seeing what I can get. I was fixing my resume up like every day. But the key thing here is that I was working on projects very often too. Like, I mean, people can go to my GitHub and see all the random stuff I was working on. I was keeping myself busy, and I guess there's really no shortcut to it. Like, I just applied online. For Bloomberg has always been like one of my favorite, or like, I guess, dream companies to work at, because I've always been really interested in finance. And I did talk about this briefly before, but I also did a lot of investing in my own. And so I worked on a this program to like scrape data on every single stock in the stock market, and I developed an algorithm to rate every single stock out of 100, and it's based on like 30 different like data points. And so I use that program to find the best stocks in the market to invest in. So the output of the program would be like an Excel sheet where every single stock, there's around like, at that time there's like 8 or like close to 9,000, and it would output me like an Excel sheet of like all the stocks with their grades. So I would just sort by the column for like the grade, and I go down one by one and then do my own research on the top ones that I said, and then I would decide like which ones to invest in from there. And honestly, it did actually work out pretty well. I found some really low key, like really interesting stocks from there. And so I was doing that like on the side. And then the key thing is that when I interviewed at Bloomberg, they specifically asked me about it, right? And being that I spent a ton of time working on this, by the way, so I had a lot to share. And I think they were just impressed by the work that I did, right? Because Bloomberg as a company, they're literally in the business of providing financial data. They saw that I have experience in the exact data that they work with. So it's like a kind of pretty obvious kind of decision on them. Like, I guess that's why they decided to like hire me, right? So the moral of the story here is that what you can get out of what I just shared is, if you really want to get into a company, work on something that is similar to like what they do, right? If you want to get into Airbnb, for example, maybe build the Airbnb clone, and actually have like a ML recommendation system, have like, things in place to actually replicate what they have. And so that's why I think I got Bloomberg. I mean, I just applied online. I had no referral or anything. We just went through the interview process, and it was quite long. It was like 3 rounds or something. One is like a high review interview, just share like, to the screen, you answer some questions. Then you have like a super day. It's like 3 back-to-back interviews. And from there, you just have to be confident in your work. And it was at this point, being that I already had published the paper and done a lot of other ML work, I think I was fairly confident in like my abilities. And I think that was apparent. And so, yeah, I guess that's how I got Bloomberg. And so what ended up happening is, and I love my Bloomberg internship. I think it was really good. This was summer of 2021, and it was amazing. But they did offer me a full time return offer that I ended up turning down, actually, because I was part of the 5-year program, and there's certain other reasons there. But so the key thing is that I'm back like on the job market. I have to like look for another job, right? So this was late, I guess, late 2021. I was starting to apply everywhere, and I thought like, okay, I have a big company on my resume now. I have Bloomberg on my resume. I have a published machine learning research paper on my resume. I should be able to get a good internship, right? And I guess I was wrong to think that, because I kept applying everywhere, and it was still a struggle. I wasn't able to land many interviews, and then I guess like, I think it's like on a very random day, I get an email back from Amazon. And at this point, I was like, wait, when did I even apply for that? And I started to check. I applied to the position like 3 months ago, and they just emailed me now about it. And I'm trying to remember the timeline here, but it was getting pretty late in the recruiting season. It was getting close to summer. I still didn't have anything, so I was getting kind of worried of like, what am I going to do? And then, Amazon just like emails me. So I'm like, oh, wow, like I have to like, really prepare. And so I think this is like March of 2022, pretty late, very late in the recruiting season, you know. And so they um, they reached out to schedule an interview, and I think, wow, if my memory is correct, I think it is. It was just two back-to-back interviews, and it was actually, you know what? This is actually so crazy. I'm like remembering the details now. So the position that I interned or interviewed and then later on interned for is called Business Intelligence Engineer. And I guess for me, I always hated lead coach style interviews. I never thought I would be good at them. So I actually purposely avoided applying to software engineering roles because I thought I'm just not gonna get them because I don't want to do lead code. And regardless, I was very much interested in like Python, like data analysis, data stuff. Given that I already did that at Bloomberg, so I thought, okay, this is like a step above that of like what I did at Bloomberg. So they, I think at the time that Amazon emailed me, I did start getting like some more interviews, and I had some like days where I had like interview one day, then like another interview the next day after. So I was having trouble like prioritizing which one to actually study for an interview, right? I think I remember specifically, I got the interview for Amazon. I booked the call, but I was like, you know what? What are the chances I actually get this? Right? What are the chances? It's probably very low. Let me focus on some of the other interviews because I think I have a better shot at them, right? And so it's like 11 p.m. the day before my Amazon interview, and I know it's going to be on like SQL kind of stuff. To be honest, my SQL knowledge is very, very basic, very elementary, and I just started reviewing here and there. Honestly, nothing serious. To me, in my head, I was doing the interview for practice. I did not go into it with any expectations of actually getting the offer. And so I guess looking back, that might have helped my case where I was very, I guess, nonchalant. I wasn't really that nervous because I knew I probably wasn't going to get it, right? And then I get to the interview, it's like the standard, tell me about yourself. They give me like a case study question. And then this part I remember where the second interview, like, because it was like back to back, the person asked me, what would you rate your SQL skills out of 10? I think he asked me that. And to be honest, I was like, you know what? There's no point of lying because he's gonna find out anyway. you know? So I literally said, I work way more with Python, so I'm much more experienced in that. For SQL, I'd probably say 3. And I think looking back, he liked the honesty. I actually was not lying by saying that. I had a lot more work in Python data analysis than SQL. And he gave me like this question. I did really bad on it, but I guess he saw I was being honest. So I think that's what ended up happening. So I finished the interview. I'm like, okay, it didn't go as bad as I thought. Or I had a good feeling about it after finishing the interview. I was going into it again, like I said, as practice. I want to see what Amazon actually interviews like. And then I guess fast forward a week, I get the email that I got the offer. And it was a huge surprise, a huge relief because all the other interviews like I got rejected from, this was the one that I thought I would never get, and I ended up getting it. And it's crazy because like it was very late in the recruiting season, right? It's like March at this point. And so to get an offer now for the summer, or like at that point in the summer, was like very rare. And so I pretty much accepted right away. It was in Seattle, so I had to start thinking about like where am I going to stay, like what's the apartment situation. But yeah, I mean sometimes I guess you just luck out. Maybe they took a look at my background and saw that I have worked at Bloomberg, I've done this and that. Maybe it's worth a shot, to give me a
Yeah.
shot. So, I don't know. That's how I was able to get it.
It looks like the thing you do really well at is like you take the initiative like you did with the machine learning research paper. Like you're solving this problem, you're making this application, and then you had the idea to like email your professor. I think a lot of students like they would be like, hey, my professor's too busy. I don't want to bother him. I don't want to go to the office hours. It's just like I don't want to do anything with that. But you took the initiative and you emailed, and he gave you that idea for a research paper, and that took you like a lot far. And
Mm.
the other question I have is like, how do you phrase a lot of the things you did in there, like in your resume? Because I know like a lot of people, they might be able to build great applications, they might have amazing work experience, but they're not exactly able to put that in your resume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I guess it's gotten a lot easier now with like GPT and everything. But it's very interesting because this was way before GPT came out. So with me, I took an actual scientific statistical approach to making a resume. In that, if you look through my GitHub, a lot of my work from like 3 4 years ago was, parsing like job descriptions, seeing how well it matches to your resume. I've spent a lot of time working on that, and that's what guides me in like giving feedback to people's resumes now, where I understand it from a statistical aspect of it, where every single word on your resume should have a purpose and should be calculated, right? So if a company is trying to hire you for a machine learning engineering role, and they're looking for someone who has experience in, you know, um, like PySpark or scikit-learn and like all the different ML libraries, right? The more times you mention those keywords in your resume, like the more it's going to stand out, right? It's just literally statistics at this point, because that's what all the ATS scanners are doing. They're extracting the text from your resume, comparing it to the job description, and seeing like how similar it is, right? And so if you have a blank resume, that's a huge problem because you're not going to match, like it's not going to rate your resume high at all. And then so you have to be able to find, get the most oh wait, hold up. The fire alarm just went off in my house. Let me just wait for it to stop. Okay, it stopped. All right. So I was saying every single word in resume should be calculated. And so what you should do is look at the job description and find the keywords that are in it. So if it includes a scikit-learn, pandas, Spark, PySpark, whatever it is, right? You should try to include that in your resume. Now it becomes very tricky because a lot of people might end up lying or kind of fabricating the stuff they put in their resume. And I guess it is a very tricky thing to do because if you're not actually skilled in those areas, then it's going to be your interviewer is going to figure that out pretty fast, right? So I thought, okay, there's no reason for lying in terms of the skills I have because they're going to find out anyway. But my perspective was, let me try to phrase it in a way that sounds as impressive but remains truthful, right? And so that was like my strategy, in that there's certain ways to phrase things to make them sound more impressive, whether it be just like your word choice or sentence structure. I'm trying to think of an example. It might be hard on the spot, but you know, if you just say you built a full stack web app to generate responses, you built a full stack web app to act like a chatbot. That doesn't sound that impressive, right? But if you say you built a full stack web app with React, TypeScript, Next.js, um, the AI SDK to provide a single channel for users to message a AI for anytime they need help, or something like that, right? And decrease latency by 50%. What I just said is basically the same thing as the sentence that I said at first, but a bit more detail and being a bit more specific, it sounds a lot more impressive, right? And so I guess like right now, people just use GPT to help with their resume. I think, you know, I guess it's well, everyone's resume starts to sound the same, to be honest, if you start doing that. But you should definitely take what it says and like make your own modifications to it. It was a lot harder before, I should say, but now it's a
Yeah.
lot easier.
It reminds me of the meme. It's like, uh, the real life version is like, I changed a light bulb. but the LinkedIn version was like, hey,
Oh,
I engineered that, some kind of like filament installation, all that. But how do you
yeah.
get better at this like skill of just making it sound more impressive?
Oh, um,
Because it's a very specific skill that might not people might not have put a lot of thought into it, but it's really the one that's setting you apart from everybody else.
yeah. That is true. I guess one part of it is like you just need to have a deep understanding of your work, right? Because if you don't understand what you're doing, then how will you describe it to someone, right? So if you like, if you don't actually know what type of like computer vision model you're using, if you don't know how it's evaluated, then you can't really describe it, right? Like if I say, like for example, for someone who doesn't have much knowledge in ML, they can say something like trained a neural network to classify images with 99% accuracy or something. It's not bad, but I guess what you can say is to get more specific is um, basically trying to say how to word this. Developed and evaluated a convolutional neural network in Python to detect and differentiate between instances of diseases with an accuracy of 95% and F1 score of 95 too, right? Because someone who's not who doesn't actually know about ML that much, this was a very base example. Obviously, I'm trying to think of a better one, but the key thing is that the better you understand your work, the better you would able to phrase it and explain what you did, right? And so that's like one example, and I guess you can extrapolate that to many other fields as well.
That's good. And I think one thing that personally helped me was like just looking at other people's resume, like
Right.
looking at the people who got accepted into like Amazon, Bloomberg, like you, or people who got accepted in Capital One, looking at their resume, because oftentimes reading someone else's resume is gonna help you a lot more than getting all these resume tips, in my
Exactly.
experience. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. So a couple of questions. So we covered a lot of tech, right? Now let's talk about your experience being like a Desi in New York City. So
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not sure how particularly it has influenced me, but I guess one
yeah,
thing is, um, I'm glad to say I haven't really been stereotyped as like a typical, Indian guy that's like NCS and whatever.
right,
But I guess when a lot of the industry is like, from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan,
yeah,
it's like you can start to relate with all of them, and I guess it helps you, make a lot of friends from the along the way, because I mean most of my friends are, Desi as well.
yeah,
And so that's like a good thing. I guess being that, to be honest, after visiting like many other cities across the U.S., I don't see myself living in anywhere other than New York,
yeah,
because they just don't have the food, they don't have the culture like that is here. Like for example, where else can I go? Like there's one memory in particular that I have that I think is like peak New York experience.
yeah,
Uh, it was like the night before our event, our like Headstarter tour event in New York. Like we had like a venue in Midtown, and I was with Farzi and Sajad. They're like big influencers,
yeah,
and it was like 1 or 2 a.m. We're in Jackson Heights getting some. Um, we're getting like pani puri
yeah,
from like a cart in like Jackson Heights. It's like where else in the world can you do that, right?
yeah.
And so that's like some peak New York, experience. And I think being Desi, I guess I don't know if I have much else to share about that.
How do you think it impacted your career in tech, or it hasn't?
Um, the
That's a tricky
This might
question.
be, I don't know. This might end up being like controversial. I'm not. I don't know if I want to. I guess okay. So being that I'm Indian, I know the
Yeah.
struggles of like immigration here, specifically in like the H-1B and other, like how long the wait is to get a green card. Like this is one thing with like the difference between India and Bangladesh and Pakistan. You can, like, if you're from India, you'll have to wait literally 100 years to get a green card, where someone from Bangladesh can get it in, like, I don't know, 1 or 2 years, right? Literally just because of the place you were born, you have such a huge disadvantage. And so with me, like, when I'm at these companies, I see the effect of like the H-1B, and that there's a lot of employees at these companies that are kind of just there in the hopes of getting a green card, but they're kind of just like locked at that company until they get it. Because if they leave that company, then they would only have like 2 months to get another job, or else they'll get deported back
Mm.
to like India or whatever. And so I guess, being that I'm Desi myself, I kind of understand their struggle, and it's made me really like empathize with them, and that you know that I see how hard they work to fulfill like their dream of like eventually getting the green card and like becoming a citizen later on.
Yes. It's a very controversial question. It's like, how do you think um, having the Trump administration is going to affect people in tech?
Oh, that's good. Oh, okay, yeah, I can answer that. It is kind of related to what I was gonna say anyway.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, like, my end goal, like the whole point is that I see business and startups as a proxy to be in a position of change, right? And what I mean by that is, when you have money, you have power,
Mm.
right? And when you have power, like, you have influence over the country, policies here and there. And so my end goal, it has kind of changed here and there, but it was one goal has always been certain, in that if I were to sell Headstarter, or like we become really successful, we have like an IPO and whatever, is to always become an investor afterwards, right? And I guess it's kind of similar to what I'm about to say, but become an investor and invest in other startups myself. Obviously, being that at that point I would have been a successful founder, I would know how to spot other founders who are bound to be successful too. So I would want to invest in them, right? And so my other goal that has become more clear to me more recently is I'm not sure if I want to be directly involved in politics, but I think the key thing to understand is that politics is actually how you incite change, right? And I think the one thing that needs to change in this country is better ways of legal immigration. And what I mean by that is, there needs to be a more clear path for high skilled immigrants to come here, because especially for people in India, they can be extremely, extremely talented, but they, because of certain immigration rules that are kind of arbitrary and ambiguous, they have to go back to India. So instead of getting all the talent here in the US, we end up losing them. They go back to India, right?
Yeah.
Literally just today, I was onboarding someone new who paid for a head starter. He got his master's from USC, and he had to go back to India because of like certain like rules or like laws, right? And it's so unfortunate that, I mean, Trump has been actually very, he has stated that he wants to give everyone who graduates from a US university a green card. I'm not sure if that will happen. I'm not sure what the legality of that is, but I think, I'm not sure if that is even a good idea, to be honest. But regardless, I think he himself understands that we need some streamlined legal immigration means, because it is a huge issue, and people are going to start going to different countries to build AI if the US is not that friendly towards people who are like high skilled. And I think, especially like I said, with the huge green card backlog, there needs to be something done for Indians. That's actually something that the incoming administration, with like Surium and some of the other people that are part of the Trump administration, they want to get rid of the country caps for the green cards, or other things, and that will help more Indians or just high school people from other countries come here. And I think that is very much necessary for the US to stay competitive, because we have these like Chinese AI labs that are extremely extremely competent. And I think that if we want to stay competitive in the international landscape, then we need to encourage more people to immigrate here rather than kind of scare them off because of all these like rules and whatever. And so I guess your question is, how will it impact tech? I think I think it's very uncertain. I mean, he is going to be inaugurated in just 10 days. Let's see what he has in store. But I think in general, I think he will do something for better legal immigration, because I think obviously, as Trump being a businessman at the end of the day, he knows that immigrants work really hard, and he has a lot of immigrants in his administration, being like Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, and Shuriam, like I mentioned. It's great to see the Indian representation in the White House, I should say, and I'm certain that hopefully they do something for Indians specifically. And so I think what we can expect is kind of it can go both ways. I do see that they have loosened, or the H1B topic is very controversial right now. I'm not sure where that's going to end up, but I think they will do something to help people legally immigrate here. And um, we might also see a harder it might become harder for startups or other companies to hire foreign talent, because they would have to show that they try to hire a citizen before them. That's kind of how it works. You have to prove to the US government that you try to hire a citizen, but no one was able to fit the criteria. And so that's why they hired someone else. Like, I think that's how like the H1B works. I feel like that process might be affected by his administration. But I think if you are really skilled, then I think hopefully he makes it easier. You know,
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
All right. Thank you so much for coming to the podcast, Faizan.
Of course, thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me. This was a really great experience.